Vitalik put out this article last week or this week, or very early this week, if it wasn't last week, about coin governance and coin voting. Because the main issue that he brings up is that currently all the DAO models are focusing on you have coins, you get votes. And those systems are easy to manipulate by whales. Is there any way that you're planning about going on DAOs that it's not directly one coin, one vote, or are you trusting that model?
Absolutely. So one coin, one vote is a simple model. And there are cases when simplicity is best. If I need a wrench, I don't want to use a multi-tool. I just need a wrench. But in general, it's important to separate relative voting power or stake and your role in the ecosystem. Meaning your role could be hosting, which means you're the highest priority demographic in Dtravel, and your every word means quite a lot to us. If you're a guest who just nomads all the time, then clearly you're basically paying rent wherever you go.
True.
You know, you should have a say. If you're someone who participated in many a dispute resolution, then you should probably be considered a better dispute resolver and accordingly be treated better or with more weight when it comes to issues that we're discussing in Dtravel. So your role and your experience level does play a part. It must.
In my mind, that's why I ask you this question as well, because I think if there is a case where you can have very easily separated tier lists when it comes to priority and when it comes to voting power, is precisely this use case, or decentralized Uber, or decentralized things in the real world. Because obviously, if you went out of your way to have a house, I mean, you have as much skin in the game as anyone could really have, right? Like, people are not just gonna gamble or play Russian roulette when it comes to their houses and the way they're letting others into their property. And similarly, they could very easily drop the system if the voting structures, or if the votes are not swinging their way, basically. And it gives them an incentive to be involved and to try and steer the community and to try and push for initiatives that they think they're worth it. So let's agree that those kind of people are going to be on the top of the hierarchy for various reasons. And then I'm just wanted to brainstorm with you. How do you decide who's worth more in the other? Are there different ways where you could value different types of travelers differently? You mentioned digital nomads, which is a very good one.
Yeah, it's based on the situation. So if we're talking about hosts, then we need to take into account a lot of hosts' opinions and give more weight to what hosts want. If we're talking about other things, then similarly, we would prioritize the opinions and the votes of different demographics. But in general, the centerpiece of home sharing economies is hosts. So in most cases, hosts will be the ones that really drive the network and the ones that everybody relies upon. But the mechanisms are to be determined, and that's part of the exciting work we're doing. But for example, to give one example, I see a situation where if there's a need in the ecosystem, if there is a need to figure out some problem, then a group of people could come together and throw out a challenge or a problem statement, and they can all stake however much tokens they believe it's worth it to them to solve this particular problem, and maybe be compensated in the back end for having provided that support. But essentially, we would be able to have someone else come in and say, oh yeah, if 6 or 7 hosts want to allocate this amount of stake towards me or transfer this amount of tokens towards me for solving a certain problem, then I'm cool with that. Actually, do you want to make it a recurring task or a recurring action? then now we have actually an in-game economy or an ecosystem service provider relationship. And that could be a beautiful way to run things.
And my friend Michael Beck talks a lot about composability and in DeFi in general. And I think that would be pretty powerful from a perspective of someone that has a house, and that house is objectively listed in a platform on the blockchain, such as Dtravel. Then you pretty much can then access all kind of DeFi stuff thanks to that, right? You can take loans based on the fact that you own a house that's worth objectively so much. You can take, I don't know, insurance, even like use your house as collateral. Are there any further? I see that you're smiling, so you probably already thought of about this as well. Yeah, how else can people access DeFi thanks to this? So what's the next steps building from here, apart from Dtravel itself, which is like, I guess, a lot of work?
Yeah, I mean, we have the basics, or rather not the basics, but the basics coming from my world. For example, you should be able to do some yield farming, staking, liquidity provision, pooling, that kind of thing, through Dtravel, the token economy. You should be able to draw value from being a part of Dtravel outside of NFT VIP perks and home sharing transactions. For example, also, if you contribute by putting your time, energy, or expertise into the ecosystem, that could be something like negotiating a contract for a group of hosts in a certain town to have a cleaning service. Someone needs to negotiate that contract. That could be something like participating in a conflict resolution talk. That could be something entirely different. But yeah, there's many ways. And to be clear, we're jamming here. We're brainstorming. We're sort of imagining. But the DAO model is not yet proven. So people need to know this. At Dtravel, we are not proponents of speculation, and we are comfortable with walking the right path with the proper timeline. So other projects are very desperate to launch their token generation event, or very desperate to say big things and create hype, to create that token spike in the graph. But for Dtravel, we're comfortable in terms of our war chest, in terms of the partners and allies we have and the backers we have. And we want to prove traction first. So whereas people might be saying, what's the token economy going to be like? When do you launch tokens? And basically, how do I make money using tokens? We're trying to go the opposite route compared to other crypto companies. The route of first engaging hosts, first trying to build the use case, the product, first getting 200,000 properties listed and more, building major partnerships, and then launching token. So nobody can tell us, you just try to do a pump and dump. You were just trying to build hype. We're trying to launch at a time when even the mainstream user, even a mainstream investor would look at us and say, oh yeah, that's probably a real company.
Right. And you want to go, you work with business accelerators, as you told me. And therefore, you know that the best kind of business is the one that makes money, right? And that is something that people forget in crypto a lot. People tend to build the white paper first and then figure out how they're going to sell it later. I reckon that's the thing that's missing in the ecosystem is companies that start out making money and then go raise funds, not the other way around. And by raising funds in this context, we're talking a token.
Totally, yeah. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? Like, what do you think of this? It's crazy that traditional companies need to build a lot of things and go to a lot of hoops in order to list on a public exchange, and then years later, people can participate. In crypto, it's the opposite. You start with the equivalent of an ICO or an IPO.
Yeah, when I first got into crypto, I was like just baffled by that, because I had started businesses myself with no money, and it had been always like, okay, you have to think of clever ways to pre-sell things, go to people, talk to them, convince them, make sure they're gonna pay you, then you get before you even have a business card or a logo or whatever. And I always found out like that's the best way to go about things, just to make sure that you have product market fit before you actually build something. And in crypto, it was just like decentralized bottle here, $1 million.